Welcome to Better, the podcast about doing better, being better, and leaving the world a better place than we found it. Hey everybody, what's up? Jay here, Better Podcast. Do better, be better, make the world a better place. That is our motto. If you're looking for me on Instagram, a few of you have said, well, typed in Better Podcast. I just go through my own personal Instagram, so it's Better Call Jay Hall because I'm a huge fan of Saul Goodman. What can I say? And the podcast, of course, you can find it on YouTube. You can find it on Spotify. You can find it on no longer Google Podcasts because now that's gone. And they didn't think to, allow us a way to export our people, which was awesome. And then Apple Podcasts as well. And then through syndication networks, just look up Better Podcast. And I have a guest today who, as I've grown up and as I've gone on my betterment journey, a piece of that journey has been to become a calmer, more stoic person, someone who doesn't get overly excited and angry over the little things in life, and who doesn't, what's the word I'm looking for, act irrational when a simple calming of the situation would probably solve everything. But I have learned in my journey that it is easier said than done in a lot of cases. And my guest today is Dr. Nick. How do I say your last name, Nick?
Sotelo.
So Dr. Nick Sotelo. And Nick, you tap into the subject, so I'll let you give kind of your grand intro here.
Yeah, absolutely, Jay. I'm excited to be here on the Better Podcast, and I help the world be better. I help men be better by showing them how to solve issues with anger that they haven't been able to do before in the past. Okay,
so I mean, I'll kind of back up a bit. As a kid, I had a lot of issues like most kids do, ranging in all types of topics, but I had anger issues. I would lash out. I'd get mad. And I was told growing up, it's because you have testosterone. It's a natural thing. Just go with it. And I carried that into my adult life, and it caused me to, teens into adult life. I thought fighting was a natural thing that guys just did. I really felt like anger was a great outlet. And I held particular pride in the fact that I would get angry for about 5 minutes, just explosive angry. Yeah. And I would calm down after that. And I was like, well, that's me handling my anger in a way that's productive and constructive. Much more productive and constructive than I had in the past, blowing up for 3-4 days straight. But it's still what didn't feel overly healthy to me. And this has, again, been a part of my betterment journey. So I guess my first question would be, how do you help men with this problem of getting angry?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of it is the idea that a problem well-defined is a problem half solved. And in my professional journey, I've been a professional helper for almost 25 years now, starting out in my early career. I've collected, degrees along the way, culminating in the doctorate. Big part of my career is spent in youth corrections. So you probably could imagine I've handled a fair share of young, mad, pissed off, angry at the world young people in that time. So a problem well-defined is a problem half solved. Most of the time, men don't even understand anger at its core level. They don't understand what it is. They understand the experience of anger. They don't understand anger as a primary feeling state. And so if you can't define it, you don't understand it, then you really don't know what to do with it. And your example it's a great one. I'll have to write it down and keep it into my notebook here, though. But men oftentimes are reinforced for anger, right? We get told things like, oh, it's just testosterone. That's what happens. And then sometimes we just, okay, I guess that's what it is, right? And so it's part of that, right? But there's other feeling states as well, too. And men and boys can be conditioned to connect more so with anger and learn to ignore or suppress the other feeling states. And so it makes men overly connected to the experience of anger, and not so much the other feeling states. So how do I help? Part of it is helping them understand really what anger is. The best way I can explain it is anger is the red light on a dashboard in your vehicle that's telling you something is going on that needs your immediate attention. It's nothing more, nothing less. Anger isn't the problem. Angry behavior that gets you in trouble, that's the problem.
Right. Okay. So I guess let's say I was an angry guy that came to you and said, I've noticed that a few different things trigger my anger.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the biggest one for a trigger for my anger is when I'm accused of something that I didn't do, and then I'm accused of it again and again and again, although I say, I didn't do this. So that's one of the things that can really light me up. I was in a relationship in the past where no matter what I did, I could have been at with them attached to their side 24 hours a day, and somehow I would have still been accused of being a cheater. Mm-hmm. So it just, now in hindsight, I go, I should have left that relationship earlier. Clearly that was an unhealthy and toxic place to be. But if I came to you with a particular, is it, I guess what I'm asking is anger generally rooted in specific things, or do you find a lot of men are just generally have gotten so angry and it's become so accepted in a way that they're just generally angry at the world? Or what's the, I guess, what is it specific, or is it more general?
Yeah, it's a little bit of all of the above, right? And so, again, if you think about the 4 primary feeling states, mad, sad, glad, and afraid, mad is analogous to anger, right? So for men, it's basically the flow is shut off to the other primary feeling states. And so everything kind of funnels through anger, right? So that's one way of thinking about it. So there can be a variety of triggers that no matter if it's something that maybe should be more in the sad bucket. Well, you don't really have a sad bucket, so it goes into the anger bucket, right? Because that's what you've been allowed to feel with that. And in the trigger part, understanding triggers is again, after we define what anger is, then we're going to go through and figure out what are your primary triggers. And most of the time, men really don't understand at a in the moment level what their trigger is, right? So in your example are you being accused of something over and over and over again? Well, if we were to slow that down and expand it, there's probably a series of thoughts that come with that accusation, right? And it's one of those specific thoughts that is the actual trigger for the ugly episode or the rage or whatever the boil over moment looks like for you.
So you're saying internally that
Mm-hmm.
one thing. Mm-hmm. So so there's something that's being said or put upon me that's consistently the same. That's kind of like making me pop, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I guess. So what do you see as being men's biggest triggers out there? I mean, how many years did you say you've been doing it for?
Well, I've been a helper for over 25 years. Started my career in 1999. So.
Okay, so you at before Y2K you were already doing this.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
So that's a background. So what are the most common triggers you find for men these days, and has it changed over your 25 years? Are you finding, because the world is drastically changing every year, right?
Yeah.
And I find for myself in my friend group, a lot of the anger these days is the amount of information they're taking in, and it's making them angry in general. Just politics and climate change and all. It's just there's this abundance of bad news coming at us all the time. Right. But I found that, and maybe this is an age related thing. I found back in the day it was more about very close things like relationships and parents getting divorced and all those sorts of things. Are there common triggers? Have you found over the years?
I don't know if there's common triggers. I think you just give a good example of how things have changed over time, right? But I think that there's a common wound. Let's say that, right? And so men are always assessing themselves around their capabilities. Do I have what it takes? Mm-hmm. Yes. Am I going to be capable with whatever is being asked of me? Yes or no, right? And so in that situation of being exposed to media over and over and over again in social media. Well, that's by design, right? It's designed to stir you up, right? And it's designed to evoke a response out of you. And surprise, surprise, in men, it's going to be most of the time an angry response, right? So that's not a surprise. But I think what it's pulling at is this idea of, do I have what it takes? Am I capable? Am I going to be able to perform given this circumstance? Most men don't want to be exposed, or that they'll have anxiety around, gosh, I don't know if I can do this, right? And if it keeps pounding at them, they don't know what to do with it. And then you have this rage or this boil over experience.
Right. Okay. And when we do part 2, I want to come back to the online thing, because I think that that's a whole topic in and of itself.
Right.
But I'd like to explore a little bit of the more personal side of anger. So I know, I have a friend who his anger comes out in yelling. I have another friend, his anger comes out in fighting. Another friend, his anger comes out in shutting down, essentially, and becoming quiet. Is that all anger? All 3 of those examples, are those anger? Or because he kind of looks at it and says, my friend that shuts down. I talked to a bunch of guys before we talked, right? Today, and he said, I think it might be angry. So I feel angry, but I feel like me expressing that anger is no longer acceptable. So kind of those different types of anger responses. Is that all anger? And is there a different way of dealing with each one of those?
Yeah. So you had fighting, yelling, and shutting down. Those were the 3 examples, right? And so I think the shutting down is probably a good example of not having the other feeling states integrated, right? So I'm feeling something. I'm most familiar with anger. But I don't know that if I act in an angry way, it's going to get me what I want. So I don't know what else to do. So I'll just shut down, right? And so I think helping that person understand that there's other feeling states that they're probably cut off from, right? And having them recognize what those are, and how to recognize them, and how to leverage them better than what they currently are. The yelling and the fighting, I mean, that's a pure means to regain control, right? And so again, this idea of do I have what it takes to perform in this situation? Am I capable? If something is telling you no, or you're being told that no, through the feedback loop that you're getting, that you aren't capable, then yelling and fighting is a way to regain your control in that moment.
Okay. I had a big problem. I mean, occasionally still, I do still to this day, but it was a much larger problem for me before. I have massive imposter syndrome. And
what it takes.
What's that?
Capability. Do I have what it takes? If you have imposter syndrome.
Yeah. I mean, I personify the guy who wins an award and sits there and goes, "Why would they even give this to me?" And that's an actual life use case. I can't enjoy wins a lot. When I get a big win, I find that I go, well, I should have been able to do this faster. I should have been able to do this better, that sort of thing. And I find my most destructive anger is towards myself. And I sit up at night and I ruminate on this idea that because I think I was a bit of a late bloomer growing up. And because of that, I think my brain is always set to, you didn't do this as good as you could have. Everybody else could have done this better. You got lucky is an often thought in my head, right? And I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Elon Musk or somebody. No, it was Warren Buffett. He was talking about the role that luck plays in success. And he talked about, it's 50-50. And I kind of started to adopt this thing in my head. And I don't know where it came from, where it was like 98-2, where it was like all luck, 2% me. And that's that. So then when I would not succeed in a situation, the amount of beating myself up that happened was prolific. I would say, and so do you find a lot of guys are like that too? Is there a lot of imposter syndrome happening? A lot of just self anger at this whole evolving from the hunter gatherer to the couch potato playing video games? Is it? I just find that as a man, it's really hard to identify what a man is these days now.
Right. I mean, and there's just getting bombarded with, the messages, right? And, is it okay to be masculine, right? And to step into that masculinity? Is that okay? Or, do you get labeled, with toxic masculinity, all those things, right? And so I think that is something that we are dealing with. I'm raising sons. I have a 20-year-old and a 16-year-old, right? So I understand that full well in terms of kind of what is the messaging and the feedback loops that are happening right now around what does it mean to actually be a man, right? I think imposter syndrome can be present for a variety of reasons. It's usually a pretty unique experience, but again, it does swirl back to this existential question that I believe swirls around most men's head is, do I have what it takes, right? And there's a variety of reasons or experiences that you've collected over time that either tip the scale to one direction or the other. I do have what it takes most of the time, or I don't have what it takes most of the time, right? And so I think that if you're tipping into I don't have, well, then it's harder for you to then understand success, expect success, or handle success when it comes your way.
Okay, that makes sense. I went through something beginning of this year where I've always been for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been a very healthy guy. Mm-hmm. My body decided to revolt against me January, New Year's Day, and I'm dealing with it now. It's a horrible pain. 24/7 pretty much, and it caused me to refocus everything in my life. It caused I had to give up my company. I had to a lot of change had to come, and so I sat down and I thought to myself, when I grew my company, I started hiring people. And I realized in hindsight, after it was gone and I had time to reflect, that I hired people to do everything that I love to do, and it left me with everything I didn't like doing. For some reason, I don't know why I did it that way. And then I started talking to other entrepreneurs who are currently entrepreneurs who have companies. They go, wait, I think I'm doing that right now. And it kind of, it made me think about our capabilities. Do we have that thought in our head because we as men, and I could be totally stereotyping guys right now, and if I am, just correct me on this, but where we kind of dive in, where we run before we can crawl kind of thing, and we get ourselves into situations where we maybe didn't fully think this thing out, and now we're angry because we're left with the consequences of that lack of thought. Yeah. I don't see it as much with women. I talk to female entrepreneurs and they're like, oh no, I hire for the things I don't like to do. Like that's, that was my whole point of getting into entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. So are we our own worst enemy? Is kind of
absolutely. Everybody is. And so some of the things that I've heard you tease out, and appreciate that you talked to some other guys before we got on the chat there, is the way that I look at the work that I do and the way I have it broken out is there's 9 steps and 3 phases, right? So you've talked about the resilience, the need for resilience along the way, and then the also need for just that self-compassion, self-forgiveness. Is the final phase where if you have an enduring problem with anger, I mean, anger has always kind of been a part of who you are and who you've been, and it's caused lots of havoc in your personal life, business life, in your relationships. That's usually an indication that you have some unfinished business from the past that you need to look at. And usually the way to get through that is through embracing forgiveness for yourself and for others.
Okay, so you said there's 9. What was that? 9 and 3. What was that?
Yep, 3 phases, 9 steps.
What are the 3 phases and 9 steps to helping a guy with anger?
Yeah, the first phase we talked about is the recognition phase, right? So you got to recognize what anger is and how it's actually impacting your life. What are your triggers? And then how do you respond effectively in the here and now, given the current circumstances that you're in, right? So
Okay.
how do you actually match up any tool, strategy, or technique to the actual specific trigger that is getting at you the most? This is where I see a lot of anger management goes wrong, because we don't spend enough time on the front end. I've been certified in several different methods and curriculums around anger management over the years. So I've gotten the opportunity to look at it at a deep level, use it with people, and then through my own professional journey, kind of rethought it. Pulled things together that I thought were better, and threw things out that I didn't find all that effective, right? So that's the first one. You got to recognize what anger is and what's really going on, and learn how to respond to it effectively. So those are mostly, what do you do in the moment when you're experiencing anger? Second phase is the resilience phase. And this is where, it's just like working out and going to the gym. You can respond all day long to anger, but that's going to get tiring. You're going to get bogged down with it. So you have to build up your resilience. And for me, that's helping men figure out who they are, what do they actually want, and how do you structure your day so that way you're closing the gap between where you're at and what you actually want. When you understand that, then you will learn that you don't have time for destructive anger. Like if you're going to get angry over this situation, or if you're going to let every little thing cause you to have a reaction that's going to create a mess, that's just stealing your time, energy, and resources from you, right? And so you'll learn from a perspective level how to sort things that maybe you just need to move past, not let bother you anymore. So that's really the second phase. Third phase is the resolution phase. And this is where, if there are, wounds from the past that are still active, that are causing, the periodic or the predictable or the I'm due for one any week, any month now type of problem with destructive anger, and then we got to look at that. We got to understand where that came from, expose the root, and then the way through that is through embracing forgiveness.
It kind of sounds like it mirrors like an AA style of, not exactly, but forgiveness being one of the largest steps of going through the process with AA. Yeah. And then the nine, what was it? Sorry.
9 steps.
Nine steps. So is that part of that 3, or is there something additional there the 9?
Yeah, there's 9 steps across the 3 phases. So each phase has 3 steps.
Okay. And then you mentioned those. Okay. So, why is this not intuitively built into us? It seems like for survival, we would, right? I don't know. It just seems strange to me that we're all. I don't know a guy that isn't, that doesn't have to deal with his anger in some way at some point. So what's going on with that?
Yeah. And so I think that, you're touching on to an excellent point. And this is why I call it anger resolution and not anger control or anger management. Again, anger isn't the problem. Angry behavior is the problem, right? There is a purpose and place for anger, right? Meaning if you walk outside wherever you're living and you see an adult beating a child, it's okay to be angry about that. And it's okay to respond and intervene, right?
Right.
Oftentimes in classic anger management, you'll hear that anger is a secondary emotion. I don't believe that to be the case at all. And I also am kind of a weirdo where I distinguish between feelings and emotions. But anger is a primary feeling. It could be secondary, but it doesn't have to be secondary to anything, right? Anger can just be anger. And there's a lot of reasons why you might have justified anger given a situation that you're being exposed to. So why doesn't this come intuitive? Well, anything that we learn in life, right? The fact that you and I are wearing clothes right now, the fact that we combed our hair, is because someone in our lives along the way told us that we need to wear clothes, and that before we get on a podcast and see somebody for the first time, that you should probably comb your hair, right?
Well, thank you for wearing clothes today. I appreciate it.
Right, thank you, absolutely, yeah. but it's that question, why is it this way? Well, when did you decide to wear clothes? Right. Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just kind of always, I guess I don't know. Right. So it's
Right.
it's the same thing with the primary feeling states, right? That if you notice somebody, and especially a young boy, that is overly connected to anger, well, you've got to get ahead of that, right? And you have to get in there, and you have to help. I mean, this is a good parental intervention. And one of the most important things that you can do as a parent is help kids identify the 4 primary feeling states, and then pre-plan what are the appropriate and effective ways to responding to them. Right. And that's one of the most critical skills that a parent can do with a child. Help them name their feeling experience, and then coach them or guide them into what is appropriate for them to do, given that they're experiencing that feeling. Right. That's super important. If you don't get ahead of this with a young boy, and I do, people say, well, women get angry. Yes, I know women get angry, but it's a different driver. It's for different purposes. Right. But if you do not get ahead of this with a boy, right, by the time testosterone does come on board and it washes over their body and brain, more good luck. That's when they would come to me in corrections, and then I had the pleasure of helping that young person through that. Right. So you learn to integrate these feelings through relationships with other people, and through having a guide and having somebody in there to help you with that.
Right. So what is the age that testosterone usually takes over for a boy?
Puberty, right? It's anywhere now it's probably 12 in the 12 to 14-year-old range, right? I think there's enough research and studies to show that we are puberty is hitting us earlier and earlier than what it used to be. So yeah, I would say in that 12, it's that middle school range, right? 12 to 14 years old.
Yeah, I don't think I hit puberty till I was like 19. So
there's always going to be outliers, right? Yeah.
Well, okay. So now,
let me tell another anecdote about this, because sometimes, and particularly women, can get really honked off about this, right? Oh, it's just an excuse. Oh, about testosterone and what it's like to be a man. Part of what I do, I'm also a university professor, and I train mental health counselors, and part of that training experience is for them to bring in video of their clients so that they can get feedback from the class and myself, right? So that's the scenario. So I watched a lot of counselors in training. I've watched a lot of video, provided a lot of supervision, and given feedback. Well, I had a student one time that was working in a trans center. So they were providing the front end counseling for people who were going through the process of becoming a trans male or trans female. And then they would work with them on the other side, once they were further along in that process, and then getting hormone replacement therapy. Right.
Okay.
And I remember watching this trans male, so somebody who was biologically born female and they're transitioning into a male, talk about their experience of their first dose of testosterone. Right. I'm watching this on camera. And what I didn't know at the time, which was revealed in this video, is that the counselor that was working with them also considered himself to be a trans male. So they both had the experience of being biological females and having testosterone for the first time.
Huh.
And what the people said on video, both of them, was that they didn't have any idea or preparation for how angry they felt, how on edge they felt, how out of control, just leaping out of their skin, and they had no idea that was part of the experience, of what it might be like to have an upsurge of testosterone coursing through their veins, right? And
that's interesting.
Yeah.
So there's some scientific evidence to what guys have been saying for quite a while.
Right.
Wow. So I'll give you just to end off part one, I'll give you a specific case.
Sure.
You brought up kids and dealing with it before they get, to that testosterone stage and everything. What if you have a single mother who is raising a boy who is exhibiting signs of anger, throwing stuff, banging stuff, screaming, those sorts of things? What, before they get to the stage where they need you,
Mhm.
What are some things that they can do because they don't relate, right? Like a single mom isn't gonna be able to relate, like you just said.
Right.
These transitioning women to men had no idea what they were getting themselves into. So the chance of single mom being able to say, "Oh, don't worry, honey, I totally understand what you're going through," is very slim. So what can they do?
Sure. And in a lot of ways, that was me when I was at that age as well. And so, um, and I'm going to say this, and it may not be the most popular thing, but there is a time where there's a flip in who is primary in a child's life, right? I mean, early on, up until that teen, preteen, young adult stage, yeah, kids, boys and girls, they need their moms, right? Kids always need their moms, right? But that's the person who's primary. A flip comes. A flip comes in that high school to young adult age when dad's role, again, it isn't better or superior to mom's role, but there's a shifting of the guard, so to speak, in terms of these things, right? And so I feel for a single mom raising boys because there's just some things that they have to approach it differently and think differently about it, because like you said, and what we've agreed upon, that they're just wired different. They don't have that experience. So what can you do? In my opinion, you have to elicit the help of strong males that can be available to you and your son and your children in that phase. So what did that look like for me? Looking back on it, so I was raised by my grandmother during this phase of my life, right? So I was in scouts. I was in karate. I was in swim lessons. I was in all sorts of sports. And it was through those activities that I was also being in front of coaches that were male, right? Strong male figures that it spoke into me, right? And that helped me figure things out and could correct me and discipline me if anger came up in a way that just wasn't appropriate, right? And so I'm grateful for those experiences. I was also a youth coach for 13 years, and so I know what it was like to work with kids that were in that situation where mom's doing the best that they can, right? And I knew what my role was there beyond just being a coach, right? Teaching them skills for a particular sport, right? That I was also there to help them shape their character, right, around some of these things. So I think that's the number one thing that you can do is a single mom is you got to get your children, especially your boys, in front of strong, safe, reliable male figures. You just have to do that.
Interesting. Okay. I think that's a good place to leave it for part one. If people want to reach out to you, how do they do so?
Yeah. My website is www.stopangertoday.com. And then, the offer that I have is add a / to that tools. So stopangertoday.com / tools. And I'll give you the whole kit and caboodle, everything that's in my program in terms of all of the anger response tools that I offer men. I'll give it to you.
Wow. Okay, great. A very on the nose website. I like it. That's how URL should be. Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll be back with Dr. Nick here, Sotelo. I'm so bad with last names.
No worries.
With Dr. Nick Sotelo, and we're going to be talking in part two. I want to really dive into the anger that can be triggered in men through the internet, through social media and all that. And I hope you guys will check out part two. Again, Better Podcast across all the platforms. Just type it in. You'll find it. It's that easy. All right. We'll see you guys for part two.
Thanks for checking out Better. If you got to the end, it must mean you liked the episode, right? So how about 5 stars, maybe a sub, maybe a share, great universal comment points, and good luck on your better journey.